On the last Saturday of August 1987, the Clayton County Fair was having its best year in a decade. Over 2,000 people packed the grandstands for the tractor pull. Old farmers in seed caps, families with kids on their shoulders, everyone waiting for the same thing they'd been waiting for 3 years running. Rick Holloway's annual show. Now let me tell you about Rick Holloway, because you need to understand him before you can understand what happened that day. Rick was 45, owned Holloway Farm Equipment, the John Deere dealership in Elkader, for 15 years. His father had built it from nothing and had been a mechanic who knew every bolt he sold. Rick was a salesman who knew every financing trick in the book. He had a gift for making farmers feel like they needed equipment they couldn't afford, for convincing them last year's model was already obsolete. That debt was just another word for investment. Old equipment wasn't just outdated to Rick, it was embarrassing, a public confession that you couldn't keep up. For 3 years he'd brought the dealership's demo tractor to the fair pull, not to test it, not to sell it, just to win, just to stand in front of the whole county and prove it every single time. 1984 John Deere 4440, won by 15 feet. 1985 4640, won by 20. 1986 4840, full pull, nobody came close. Local farmers brought their working machines, paid-off tractors 10 and 15 years old, maintained by their own hands. Rick brought whatever was newest on his lot, fresh from the factory with every option checked. It wasn't really a competition anymore. But 1987 was going to be different. Rick had something special. Now let me tell you about the John Deere 4850, because it was unlike anything Clayton County had ever seen. 200 horsepower, computerized fuel injection, digital readouts for everything: temperature, hydraulic pressure, ground speed, fuel consumption, and something brand new for 1987, a traction management computer. If the wheels slipped, the computer cut power to prevent damage. If the engine overheated, it dialed back performance, every sensor feeding every decision. The engineers called it progress. Rick called it his ticket to permanent dominance. He'd ordered the 4850 in March, specifically for August. $82,000, more than most farms in Clayton County were worth. Morning of the fair, he drove it slowly through the midway, past the funnel cake stands and the livestock barns. He wanted everyone to see it, wanted everyone to know what was coming. By 5 o'clock, the heavyweight class was underway. 6 local farmers entered. Their machines were the workhorses of their operations, well-used, well-maintained, showing their years. The best of them, Dale Henderson on a 1979 John Deere 4440, pulled 287 feet before the sled stopped him. Respectable. The crowd cheered. Then Rick climbed into the 4850. The crowd went quiet. The flag dropped, 300 feet, 320, 360, 400. At 406 feet, the sled finally stopped him, the longest pull in Clayton County Fair history. The crowd applauded politely. Rick walked to the announcer's platform and took the microphone. 406 feet, he said, grinning at 2,000 people. That's what happens when you invest in the best. Now I know some of you are running antiques out there, running machines your grandfathers bought. That's fine for a museum, but this is a competition. Does anyone really think they can match what this machine just did? Nobody moved. That's what I thought. See you next year. Maybe by then some of you will have upgraded to real tractors. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Old-timers shook their heads. The farmers who'd competed looked at the ground. Then a pickup truck pulled into the fairground. Now let me tell you about Howard Pickkins, because he is the reason this story is still being told 35 years later. Howard was 63, had farmed 280 acres in the northeast corner of Clayton County for 40 years, Took the farm from his father in 1947 at age 23. Went to church on Sundays. Paid his bills. Didn't owe money to anyone. Drove a 1972 Ford pickup he'd maintained himself for 15 years. And in his barn, under a canvas tarp that hadn't been lifted in 9 years, sat a 1950 Oliver 88. Let me tell you about that tractor. The Oliver 88 was a row crop machine built in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Solid, reliable, designed to last. Howard's father Earl had bought it new in 1950, walked into the implement dealer in Elkader, the same building that was now Rick Holloway's showroom, and paid $2,800 cash. Everything he'd saved from 4 good years of crops. "This tractor will outlast both of us," Earl told his son. "You take care of it and it'll take care of you." Earl farmed with the Oliver until 1970. Howard retired it in 1978 when he finally bought a used John Deere 4020 for the heavier work. But he couldn't sell his father's machine, covered it with a tarp, left it in the back of the barn. 9 years, not started once. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever kept something everyone told you was useless? Something that cost you space, maybe a little pride, but you kept it anyway because it meant something no dollar amount could measure. Howard had kept that tractor through hard times and good ones, through droughts and floods, through the deaths of his parents and his wife and the departure of his sons, when dealers offered a few $100s to haul it away, when his boys said sell it. He kept it because his father said it would outlast both of them, and because he'd always known somewhere deep down that someday it would matter. That morning Howard had gone to the barn before sunrise, pulled back the tarp, checked the fluids, cleaned the carburetor, poured in fresh fuel. Then pressed the starter. The Oliver coughed, rattled, caught, settled into a steady rumble that hadn't been heard in 9 years. Howard stood in the early light and listened to that sound, and made a decision. The trailer came down the gravel road slowly. People turned to stare. On it the Oliver 88, faded green paint worn to bare metal in places, exhaust pipe held with baling wire, a thin wisp of smoke from the stack burning off old oil. "What the hell is that?" "That's an Oliver, an 88. Haven't seen one of those in 20 years. Howard backed the trailer to the edge of the track and began unhooking chains. Didn't acknowledge the murmurs, just worked the way he always worked, steady, unhurried. Rick Holloway saw it and started laughing. "Someone call the museum," he said into the microphone, loud enough for the whole grandstand. "They're missing an exhibit." Nervous laughter from the crowd. "Hey, old-timer," Rick walked over. "You know this is a tractor pull, right? Not a parade of relics." Howard didn't respond. Finished unchaining the Oliver, climbed onto the seat, started the engine. It caught with a cough and settled into its rumble. Not smooth like the 4850, rougher, more alive. "You can't be serious," Rick said, less certain now. "You want to enter that against my 4850? Howard looked at Rick for the first time. His eyes were calm. "I want to pull. That's what this competition is for. That thing won't make 10 feet. You'll embarrass yourself in front of the whole county." "Then it won't take long." The crowd went completely quiet. The announcer cleared his throat. "Rules say any tractor over 50 horsepower can enter. The Oliver's rated at 55. Entry fee was paid. He's entitled to pull." Rick's jaw tightened. He looked at the old men nodding in the stands, at younger farmers watching with sudden interest. He could feel the crowd starting to shift. "Fine," Rick said. "Let the old man embarrass himself." He walked back to the platform, arms crossed, smiling the smile of a man who knows he's already won. Howard drove the Oliver to the starting line. "Now let me tell you about the first pull, because this is where everything started to change." The flag dropped. The Oliver's engine roared, a different sound than the 4850's controlled purr, rougher, like something alive. Black smoke from the exhaust. rear wheels biting into dirt. 10 feet, 20, 50. He's actually pulling it. 100, 150, 200. The sled getting heavier with every foot. That was how the mechanism worked, transferring weight forward, making the load progressively harder. The Oliver kept going. 250, 300, the crowd on its feet. 320, 340, 360. The wheels started to spin. The engine screamed. Black smoke poured from the stack. 360, the tractor stopped. Not a full pull, but 360 feet, only 46 short of Rick's championship mark. The crowd erupted, not politely, with real disbelief and joy. Howard shut down the engine and climbed off, face still calm, but something in his eyes, a quiet satisfaction his father would have recognized. Rick Holloway's smile was gone. Now let me tell you what Howard did between pulls, because nobody talks about this part, and it's exactly why the second pull went differently. He walked the track, studied it. The first 200 feet were hard-packed dirt, good traction, but after that the surface was softer, muddier. Afternoon heat had baked the top layer, but underneath the soil was still wet from morning dew. Every modern tractor had struggled in that soft section. Wheels started spinning. Computers cut power to protect the equipment. Howard crouched beside the Oliver's rear tires and let out a few pounds of air. Increased the contact patch. No manual told him to do this. No computer suggested it. It was knowledge from his father, passed down the same way his father received it. He checked the drawbar angle, made small adjustments that don't appear in any owner's manual. Then he thought about something Earl used to say. Computers are for bankers. Tractors are for farmers. Bankers want to protect their investment. Farmers want to get the job done. Rick climbed into the 4850 for his second pull. He didn't want to. He'd already won, hadn't he? But the crowd was watching and there was no way out. He hit the throttle, 300 feet, 320, then the mud section. The 4850's wheels started to slip. The traction sensors detected it immediately and did exactly what they were designed to do. They cut power. Rick stomped the pedal. The computer overrode him. 340, engine backing off, protecting itself. 350, temperature climbing, more power cut. 350, the 4850 stopped. Rick slammed the steering wheel. The computer had done its job perfectly, protected an $82,000 machine from wheel damage. But it had cost him 56 feet. He climbed down, walked to the edge of the track, didn't look at the grandstands. Howard Pickkins climbed onto the Oliver 88. Now let me tell you about the next 3 minutes, because they are still the most talked about 3 minutes in Clayton County history. The flag dropped. No sensors to override him. No computers deciding what was safe. No traction management protecting anyone's investment. Just an engine, a transmission, and a man who knew exactly what his machine could do. 100 feet, tires digging, dirt flying. 200, the crowd already screaming. 300, the mud section, the same mud that had shut down every sensor on the 4850. The Oliver had no sensors. Wheels spinning, mud everywhere, the engine hitting a pitch that seemed impossible for a 37-year-old machine. Howard never touched the throttle, kept demanding everything the Oliver had. 320, 340, 360. 370, the crowd deafening, people jumping, grabbing strangers. 380, 390. The sled barely moving, the Oliver barely moving. 400 feet. The engine made a deep mechanical groan. For one moment Howard thought it was over. But his father's voice came to him. This tractor will outlast both of us. He kept the throttle down. 401, 402, 403. The sled stopped. The Oliver's wheels spun free. Howard let off the throttle. And 2,000 people lost their minds. Howard shut down the engine, climbed down on shaking legs, could hear individual voices through the noise, old farmers weeping, his name being called. Then he heard something else from the track behind him. Rick Holloway's 4850 was stuck. Now let me tell you about the mud pit, because this is where the story becomes something more than a competition. During Rick's second pull, the 4850 had churned the soft section into something close to quicksand. When Rick tried to drive off after the pull, the machine sank into its own ruts, 18 inches deep. Wheels spinning, computer cutting power, Rick pushing the pedal, computer overriding, again and again. The traction management system doing exactly what it was engineered to do, preventing wheel damage, and in doing so, making escape completely impossible. The $82,000 John Deere 4850 was stuck like a car in a snowdrift, every sensor working perfectly, every computer making the right decision, and going nowhere. Rick climbed down, face pale, the whole county watching. Get a tow. No truck at the fair could handle 8 tons of tractor in mud that deep. Other competitors had already loaded and left. Howard stood at the track's edge, looked at the stuck machine, looked at his Oliver. "I could pull it out," he said quietly. Somehow the whole fairground heard it. Rick's face went through confusion, anger, something close to fear. That antique couldn't pull a shopping cart. It just pulled 403 feet of sled. Howard walked to the Oliver, started the engine, drove carefully onto the track, backed up until the drawbars aligned. "Hook the chain." A fair official connected the two machines, the 37-year-old Oliver to the brand new 4850. Rick stood at the edge of the track, arms at his sides, watching the tractor he'd mocked prepare to rescue the tractor he was proud of. Howard engaged the clutch. The Oliver roared, old tires finding firm soil beneath the mud. The chain went taut. For a moment, nothing happened. 8 tons buried deep. Then the Oliver moved forward, inch by inch. No sensors, no cutoffs, no protection mode. It just pulled. The 4850 lurched, moved, rolled forward onto firm ground. Free. The grandstand exploded. People screaming, crying, grabbing strangers. Old farmers who remembered when every tractor was mechanical, when every pull was about knowing your machine, weeping in the stands. Howard unhooked the chain, drove the Oliver off the track, shut down the engine. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The official results listed Rick Holloway as 1987 champion. 406 feet beat 403 by the rules. But nobody in Clayton County remembered it that way. What they remembered was a 63-year-old man on a 37-year-old tractor coming within 3 feet of the most expensive machine in the county, and then pulling that machine out of the mud when all its computers couldn't. The fair board met that night and created a new category, the Heritage class, for tractors more than 30 years old. Howard Pickkins was named the inaugural champion. The brass plaque on oak has been in the Pickkins family ever since. Rick Holloway left Clayton County the following spring, sold the dealership at a loss. People said he couldn't stand walking into the feed store anymore, couldn't stand hearing about the time the Oliver pulled him out. Howard kept the Oliver, won the Heritage class 14 times, nobody ever beat him. He died in 2001 at 77, farmed until his last year. At his funeral, pallbearers drove tractors, 3 John Deeres and the Oliver 88 polished and running, carrying the casket to the cemetery. Half the county lined the road. His son David came home from Minnesota for the service, and stayed, took over the farm, learned the Oliver the way his father and grandfather had. In 2005, a Des Moines museum offered $50,000 for the machine, more than it had ever been worth. David turned them down. "My grandfather bought this in 1950. He told my father it would outlast both of them. It did. If I take care of it, it'll outlast me too. But it's just a machine, the museum representative said. David looked at the Oliver in the same barn it had occupied for 55 years. My father pulled an $82,000 tractor out of the mud with this machine, a tractor with every sensor and computer available in 1987. And this Oliver, 37 years old, no electronics, nothing, pulled it out like it was nothing. That's not just a machine. That's a lesson. The representative left without the tractor. The Oliver 88 is still in the Pickkins family barn, still running, still winning the Heritage class every August. And the brass plaque from that day still sits on a shelf in the farmhouse. It reads, Clayton County Fair Heritage Class Champion, Howard Pickkins and his Oliver 88, proof that the old ways still work. Rick Holloway had $82,000 and the most advanced technology 1987 could produce. Howard Pickkins had his father's tractor and 40 years of knowing exactly what it could do. When the mud came, the computer gave up. The Oliver kept pulling. That's the difference between a machine that protects itself and a machine that gets the job done. That's the difference between technology and tradition. 35 years later, people in Clayton County are still telling this story. The Oliver still runs.